is Nixon Gandon. I'm the head of the Events and Conference Unit at the Strategic Thinking Institute of South Africa. In today's thought leader interview, we are going to bring you the chairperson and the founder of the Strategic Thinking Institute, Mr. Lizwe Ngalo, to tell us more about the idea behind it and how it will change the fortunes of the organizations. Welcome, Lizwe, and thanks for coming through.
Thank you very much, Nixon.
All right, firstly, before we go any further, tell me what global change is inspiring the Strategic Thinking Institute?
Nixon, we are seeing sweeping change globally. And I think if I take you back to really the origins of man, if we go back to the Stone Age and what the Stone Age was all about, it was really about human beings developing abilities to survive. And there were critical skills that were important for survival at that stage. And then the world moved on beyond that. You know, civilization came into play. We started to see the world beginning to enter an era of industrialization. Again, in that era, there were critical skills that were necessary for any human being, for a company, for an organization to survive in that time. And there were key skills that were required for that era. Beyond the industrial age, we started to see the advent of the information age. And again, in the information age, it was all about being first on the critical information that's required to be able to take decisions, to be able to advance the objectives of the organizations, the goals of the organizations, and so forth. What we're seeing now, and I think this is a global phenomenon, what we're seeing now is companies and organizations beginning to understand that we are in a concept or concept-driven era, where it's no longer so much about the physical assets that you have. It's no longer so much about the skills and techniques that you may have cultivated in the eras gone by. A lot of emphasis now is coming into understanding what it takes to survive in this age of conceptual thinking. More and more organizations are not just emphasizing investing in physical assets, but there's a huge emphasis on investing in people, in brains, in the ability that people actually have to make companies competitive. And that's the change that the Strategic Thinking Institute is somewhat beginning to respond to by putting up a program, by putting up an institution which focuses on that era of conceptual thinking and really focusing on helping organizations develop the brain power and the processing power that people's brains have in order to take organizations to the next level.
This sounds interesting. So it means that, you know, because of all those past experiences, past stages, now we are saying we are now currently in the conceptual stage, in the conceptual age. Tell me, because the organizations that time and the organizations here, they are totally different. Those days, Stone Age people used to survive. It was a subsistence setup. But now we've got public sector, we've got companies, we've got private sector, state-owned enterprises. Where does this Strategic Thinking Institute fit in this paradox, into this setup which we are currently seeing? Which market are you targeting? Which market is it going to serve? Who are the individuals, or is it, can you elaborate so that at least we'll be able, people out there can be able to understand what this whole thing is all about and how it fits into the current setup?
At the core of any organization, whether it's a private sector entity, whether it's a public sector organization, at the core of any organization is leadership. And where there is leadership, there is decisions and there is decision making. But what is happening is that the pace of change and the complexity that we're beginning to see globally in business, in public institutions, the pressure on resources is complicating the decision-making process. And what we are trying to do with the Strategic Thinking Institute is to go into the heart of that decision-making process. Help people to actually understand that once you get into a leadership position, your core job, your key role that you play in an organization is enabling that organization to take critical decisions at the right time, with the right level of accuracy. And those decisions have got to impact the organization in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term. So essentially, in a way, it is helping the life of the institute to have organizations that are clearly defined, that have got specific goals, they've got key objectives that they want to achieve over a defined period of time. Where we are coming in at the institute is really helping leadership teams, and we're talking about teams at board level, teams at executive level, teams at business unit level, when you're talking about private sector institutions. But when you're talking about public sector institutions, we're really talking about public leadership. So people who have at their disposal public resources, tax resources that are being used to impact service delivery, to impact services that are actually rendered to citizens. Those are the people that we are targeting with the Strategic Thinking Institute. It's people whose key responsibility, key role, is to make sure that they take the kind of decisions that will have a positive impact on organizations. And that's really where the Strategic Thinking Institute is targeted. But beyond that, understand that the belt of human resources is one that is continuously rotating.
Yeah.
You've got old, more experienced leaders phasing out of their careers, but you always have new people coming up. More and more organizations are very keen nowadays to put in place talent planning processes, succession planning processes. All of those people are people that get prepared today for the future, who will eventually get into leadership positions and key decision-making positions in the future. And so with the Strategic Thinking Institute, we're also targeting working with those people, helping them to prepare for more complex roles that they will find themselves in once they start getting into leadership positions in the organizations that they work for. So it is an absolute essential service that every organization will be able to benefit from in terms of really focusing leadership on the art of decision making, using strategic thinking frameworks and capabilities and tools and techniques to be able to do that.
You mentioned the issue that is the human resources belt, which is constantly moving. Tell me, because look, when you are looking at things of human resources, there have been a lot of programs that have been initiated from long back before the Strategic Institute has been set up. We had executive degrees, MBAs, and all those kind of things, and people are graduating on a yearly basis. Where does this thing fit in? Because with this Strategic Thinking Institute, its programs are going to be competing against those programs, or they'll be just among other continuous professional development programs that will be there. Where does this thing fit in? Will it be competing against the Harvard students, against the other MBA executive programs, or can you elaborate on that a bit?
That's a very good question, Nixon, and I think it's one that I would like to deal with fairly extensively. Let me take you back a little bit. Firstly, the reason why we put the Strategic Thinking Institute together, at the heart of the reason for it is a critical observation that we picked up in a lot of the large organizations where in our consulting company, Flamingo, we facilitate a lot of strategy sessions, both at board level, at executive level, at times even at business unit level. And in that facilitation work, some of the things that we picked up was that there is always a very small percentage of executive leadership in organizations that is comfortable with the process of creating strategy. And in the process of creating strategy, a very critical input is the ability to think in a strategic way. But when you look at that lack of creative or strategic thinking at the executive level, and you try and find a correlation between the level of education that is in that team and the fact that there isn't enough capability in creating strategy, it starts raising questions of the sort of impact that business education, you're talking about MBAs, management development programs and so on. You start asking yourself a question whether that education is actually focusing on this essential skill, which is really the most critical skill in an executive level individual. And so in our investigations, what we found is that your conventional business school largely does not spend enough time developing this particular skill, this particular capability in executive candidates. And so our program is not necessarily a program that is meant to replace the MBA. It is not necessarily meant to replace the management development program, but our program is meant to complement what actually comes out of the MBA program. But it is very specific, it is very niche, and I think the main difference is that the Strategic Thinking Institute is a coaching institute. It is not an institute that will teach the subject of strategy. We are about coaching the subject of strategy. Business schools teach subject matter. They will teach stats, they will teach finance, they will teach leadership, etc., etc. What we do, we coach the competency of thinking in a particular way to be able to then utilize the subjects that are coming out of programs like MBAs, etc., to arrive at making critical decisions.
That's a powerful thing. All right, the word strategy is often loosely applied. And tell me exactly, just to sum up on this, what perspective of the meaning of strategy are we going to be focusing at Strategic Thinking Institute? Because it's loosely applied in many dimensions. So which dimension are we going to be looking at when you are talking of Strategic Thinking Institute? Which strategy dimension, strategy meaning dimension, will you mainly be looking at?
You're right. More often than not, you talk to most organizations out there. In fact, a lot of the executives that we've spoken to in your listed organizations largely, when they are looking to replace a top leader in an organization, there is always almost a standing requirement in every top leader job profile, and that requirement is a requirement of somebody who can think strategically or somebody who can operate at a strategic level. But there's never a deep enough question around what exactly that capability is, what exactly that skill is. Now, the conventional sort of understanding of strategy is that strategy is about strategic planning, or putting together a strategic plan. Now, any person who's been to an MBA or a business school or a management development program would be able to put together a strategy. But what we are talking about with the Institute and the exact emphasis that we're looking at from a strategy point of view isn't about the process of putting together a strategy. It's actually about the thinking process that one needs to acquire and the model behind that, that then enables an individual to be able to make strategic decisions. So essentially there are really 4 key things that we're going to be looking at in terms of the Strategic Thinking Institute. The first thing that we want to inculcate in our candidates, people that become candidates of the Institute, is we want people to be able to generate insight, because insight is a critical feeder into developing a strategic view of anything. And what we mean by insight is the ability to really understand a situation deeply. So that's almost the starting point. The second point, once you've generated insight, you are now in a position to be able to generate foresight, to anticipate what's coming around the corner, to be able to predict, and to predict with a certain degree of accuracy. Now, in most organizations, we talk about scenario planning. And in the process of scenario planning, essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to generate foresight. But we have a specific process, a specific program, techniques that will fuel the foresight mining exercise and actually make an individual able to predict what is likely to happen down the road. The third critical skill that we bring in is the whole ability to exercise judgment. Now, one of the things that present-day leaders deal with is complexity. There is a glut of information that is at their disposal every time they have to take a critical decision. So what we're doing with the Institute is we're putting together specific steps, specific frameworks that will allow executives to be able to take the situation, take all of that complexity, take all of that glut of information, decipher it down to what is absolutely essential for them to make a judgment and then be able to take a decision. So that's the third critical thing. The fourth critical thing is we want to develop executives to be able to take all of those 3 steps and be able to align them, align resources, align teams, and then be able to reflect on what sort of changes they need to be able to do before they restart the cycle all over again. So those 4 key critical dimensions of creating strategy are the ones that we're going to be focusing on. Insight development, foresight generation, judgment and decision making, as well as reflection.
Those are powerful things. Elizabeth, thank you very much for talking to us. Congratulations on launching the STI, and we look forward to be talking to you again in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.